Okay, well, welcome this morning. If you're here for the first time, it's great to see you. Thanks for coming. My name's Chris, or Butters as my nickname is. I'm one of the leadership team here, and I'm going to start with a little challenge for you this morning. Could you just close your eyes? Everyone just close your eyes. That's not the challenge, that's just the first bit. And I want you, in your mind, to invent a new colour. Okay? I want you to try and invent a new colour, a colour that only you have seen, a colour that is not like any other colour that already exists. It can't relate, it can't be like a shade of grey. I've learned through my wife there's like a billion different shades of grey, from elephant's breath to pavilion grey and all these different colours, but it must be a colour that no one's ever seen before, that doesn't exist at the moment, that we don't know about. Who's managed to do that? Has anyone actually managed to think of one? No. Oh, Ruth's managed to think of one. Okay, Ruth, seeing as you've managed to think of one, can you describe that colour to us? No. You can't describe it to us. Thank you. You served my illustration well. It's really hard, isn't it, to try and explain something that only we can see, but no one else can, and that no human eye has seen before. It's basically an impossible task to try and explain something that none of us has ever seen before, and using only the language that we have. Why am I starting with that? Well, I'll explain to you in just a moment. Let me just remind you where we are. We've been studying through the book of Daniel. This is our penultimate week in this book. We're near the end, and we're really looking forward to Claudine, who's going to finish off the series for us next week. But in this series, we've been looking at Daniel, and he's this Jewish guy who is living in exile. His country's been overtaken by the Babylonian Empire. He's been carried off to Babylon, and he's ended up serving in the courts of various kings of Babylon, and then actually the empire that followed, the Medo-Persian Empire. And he served these unstable, ungodly kings whilst actually remaining somehow faithful to his God, the one true God, Yahweh of Israel, and who he is, of course, our God as well. And we've been looking at what Daniel teaches us today in Liverpool in the 21st century about how do we live our lives as exiles, because we are citizens of heaven, but we're here on earth in Liverpool. How do we live the 90% of our lives that is away from church and away from our church family, when we're in the workplace or at the school gate or in uni or in school? How do we live for God in a land that basically doesn't know him? And so far in the book of Daniel, chapters 1 to 6, there's been some really interesting stuff. And it's basically been stories of events that really happened, of Daniel and his friends interacting with these rulers in Babylon. We've seen all sorts of turmoil and crisis. We've seen changes of regime. We've seen death-defying moments. We've seen all these incredible stories, lions' dens, fiery furnaces, dreams and visions, all these sorts of things. But today, we see a bit of a big change in the book of Daniel, because actually the focus shifts now away from events and things that happened to more like dreams and visions and revelations that God gives to Daniel. And these are interactions where God, in his grace, reveals incredible, dramatic glimpses into the future. Not just Daniel's future, but the future of the world, the future of eternity. And so the narrative of Daniel changes from this point on into what we call apocalyptic literature. Apocalyptic literature. That sounds a bit scary, doesn't it? The Bible, as we know, is made up of all sorts of different types of literature. You've got history, you've got narrative, you've got poetry, you've got all sorts of stuff in there, but you've also got this stuff called apocalyptic literature. And this is basically, when we say apocalyptic literature, it's like often it's a vision or a dream or a prophecy full of symbolism that gives us a glimpse of an incredible future that actually it's really hard for us to understand. Often these are visions that contain news of, frankly, world-shattering events, both in the human realm, in the earthly realm, and the spiritual realm, that actually no human eye has seen. No human eye has seen. And so in the Bible, the two most famous places we get this type of literature is in Daniel, and of course at the end of the Bible, Revelation. And because these apocalyptic glimpses of the future are so unusual, they're so strange, honestly, they are just a bit weird. They've been debated and talked about for centuries as people just try and work out what is going on here. And it's possible to get a bit lost in it all, to go into conspiracy theories and sums and additions and subtractions and what does this mean and what does that mean? And we can get a little bit lost in it, and that's what I don't want us to do this morning. I want us to try and just apply what I think God is saying from this. But we have to understand it can be a bit weird. And that's why I started with that task this morning, because I wanted just to get the idea of what's going on in apocalyptic literature often is that we're trying to communicate something that is unseen or something that only one person has glimpsed and that is out of this world, that no one else has seen or no one can point at it and say, look at that. And the only thing we've got that we can describe it with is our own language. And our own language doesn't do it justice. So if you were trying to invent a color that didn't relate to any other colors, how on earth would you describe that color? You can't say it's a bit like red or a bit like yellow because it's unlike anything else. And it's a bit like what's going on in this. God gives Daniel this vision, this dream. And all Daniel's got to try and convey what's going on in this crazy dream is his human words. And when we read him, it's like, what is he talking about? But that's what's going on in this situation. It's a very difficult thing to understand. It's an even more difficult thing to preach about. So I hope you'll give me a lot of grace this morning. And interestingly, Chris CB was originally going to do this preach, but he magically booked a holiday, which just happened to coincide on this weekend. So Chris, if you're watching on YouTube, hi to you. I really hope it's not raining in Turkey. But actually, I've got to say, as I've studied this and I've read about it and bringing it to you this morning, I feel God's really grown this in me, really given me a real heart for this, and I hope it comes across this morning because I think there's a lot we can take out of it. When we get through the weirdness and we get through the kind of craziness of it, as you'll see, there's a lot of rich stuff in here for us to take this morning. So we're going to try and just be blessed by it this morning and dig in. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to summarize the whole chapter first. I'm going to take us through it and tell you what goes on, and then I'll try and pull out some application at the end. But if you've got Daniel 7 in front of you, that'd be really helpful. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'll summarize and pick some bits out. Did anyone actually read it in preparation? Yeah. What did you think? Interesting? Very interesting, isn't it? Okay, good stuff. So let's set the scene. Daniel 7, it's really important to understand this. It takes place actually out of order. Okay, so last week, Phil brilliantly preached on Daniel in the lion's den. That was chapter 6 of Daniel. And this chapter 7, this dream that Daniel has, we know took place around actually 15 years before he was in the lion's den. We know that because he tells us this dream happens in the reign of King Belshazzar. Now, King Belshazzar was the final king of the Babylonian Empire. And by the time the lion's den happens, we're in a new empire. Because the empire of the Medes and Persians has taken over. It's the king called Darius. Also the Medes and the Persians have King Cyrus, Kurush, who our Iranian friends are very familiar with. He's a great king in history, actually, a very benevolent king. He's in the Bible and very well thought of. So we know that this happens before the lion's den. Just keep that in mind because it's helpful context for what we'll come to. But what we've got in this chapter is a dream, okay? Daniel says that God gave me a dream. And what happens in this dream? Well, what happens is he sees a succession of beasts. And I told you this is going to be a little bit weird, and it is weird to us. But he sees water and he sees land, and one by one, he sees these beasts come out of the water. And the first beast is a lion. Okay, so far so normal. But this lion has wings. And as he sees this lion, he's flying, and then suddenly the wings are ripped off. And he ends up on the ground, and then he stands up, and it says this lion was given the heart of a man. That's a very unusual thing to happen, isn't it? That's not something we could really point to as ever happening in human history. And then the second beast comes up out of the water, and this beast is a bear. Again, so far so normal. But what we learn about this bear is that it's a bear that is kind of unevenly built. It's raised up on one side. One side is sort of higher and stronger than the other. And also it's carrying in its mouth 3 ribs. As I prepared this preach, we were preparing for a party last night and we ended up having ribs. I think this passage really got to me. I just really got hungry for ribs, and I think it was because of this bear. Anyway, you didn't need to know that. And then after this bear, a third beast comes out of the water, and it's a leopard. But again, not a normal leopard. This leopard has wings, just like the lion, but it also has 4 heads, okay? And at this point, we're just like, what is going on here? This all feels a little bit strange, a little bit weird. What is God trying to show Daniel through this dream? It's very vivid imagery, but actually, although it's a bit odd and a bit weird, we're actually very confident about what these 3 animals represent, okay? Because we learn that each animal, and as the chapter goes on, more and more of this dream gets unpacked. Daniel asks questions to one of the people in the dream who tells him more and tells him more and tells him more. And what we find out is that each of these beasts represents a kingdom or an empire. Okay? Each one represents an empire that's going to reign on earth. And it's really all about, at this point, the history or the future, at that point, of the Near East, of that area that Daniel was living in, between the 6th century BC, where Daniel was living, and the next few hundred years. And so what we learn is that the lion represents Babylon, the Babylonian empire, in which at the time of the dream, Daniel was living. Okay? This is representing Nebuchadnezzar and then Belshazzar, who was living under. And Daniel's learning, okay, this empire that looks really strong, it's flying, it's this flying lion. It's going to have its wings ripped off, and it's going to fall. And then it's going to be replaced by a new empire. And this is where the bear comes in. The bear is the next empire. And we know that actually this next empire was the Medo-Persian Empire. In 539 BC, the Medo-Persian Empire overtook Babylon. Cyrus and Darius and all these kings came through. And in the dream, this bear is told to eat flesh, to go and eat flesh. It's told to go and conquer more and more. And the Medo-Persian Empire was a huge and successful empire. But do you remember what we said about the bear? That it was lopsided. It was raised up on one side and stronger on one side. Well, what we know about the Medo-Persian Empire is that it was lopsided. It started off as a partnership, the Medes and the Persians, but then the Persian side really became the dominant force, and the Medes was kind of overtaken by the Persians. So this is incredible insight that Daniel is getting into what's going to happen in world history. And the ribs in this bear's mouth probably represents 3 of the other countries that this Medo-Persian Empire conquered. It conquered Babylon, it conquered Egypt, and it conquered Lydia, the Lydian Empire. So that's what the ribs represent. But then we see another empire come, because actually the Medo-Persian Empire was fairly short-lived, and soon afterwards, Alexander the Great of the Greek Empire emerged and overcame the Medo-Persian Empire. So I could put some arrows on there so you know. But this leopard has 4 heads. Well, why? Because after Alexander the Great died, his empire was kind of split into 4 underneath the power of his 4 captains, okay? And so that's why you've got this kind of 4-headed leopard. And the reason we're fairly confident of this is because in the next chapter, which we're not going to study today, Daniel has another vision, another dream, which kind of unpacks more and gives him more context. And in that dream, he sees a ram and a goat fighting. And he says that the ram and the goat are the Medo-Persian Empire and the Greek Empire. Okay, so we know that this is what God is trying to show him. He's showing him, Daniel, there's going to be another empire and another empire and another empire. They're going to keep replacing each other. And this is all confirmed for us in human history. Okay? So it's weird, it's strange, but actually we've got a good degree of certainty about what's going on here. Okay? Are you with me so far? Yeah? Good, well done. Okay, because it's going to get weirder. Because what happens next is Daniel sees a 4th beast coming out of the water. And this beast, Daniel says, is terrifying and frightening and very, very powerful. And it's an unidentified type of beast. He doesn't liken it to any other animal that we know on earth. He tells us it's got iron teeth and bronze claws, and he says it's different from all the former beasts. This beast has 10 horns, and in apocalyptic literature, horns normally represent kings. And these are consecutive. They're all living at the same time. These horns are all there at the same time. And this dream goes on to tell us that this is an evil and violent beast. It says that it crushed and devoured its victims and trampled underfoot whatever was left. And then as Daniel watches this beast, an 11th horn, a smaller horn with eyes and a mouth, obviously, rises up out of the head of this beast and uproots 3 of the horns that were already there. And this horn just starts spouting blasphemous and boastful language. And it's horrible and it's ugly and it's disgusting. And Daniel's just appalled by this 4th beast. And it says that this beast will devour the whole earth, and it will wear out the saints of the Most High. The saints of the Most High, that's the followers of God. That's us. This 4th beast is going to devour and wear out the saints of the Most High. It says it's going to think to change the times and the law. This 4th beast is going to have power, destructive power over the people of the earth. And it's going to make the people of God suffer. And we're getting really very apocalyptic in our language now. This is like nothing we can see or have seen on the earth. And yet God has given this to Daniel for some reason. This beast is different. And unlike the other beasts, we can't link it to an obvious other human empire. We can't say it's this empire or that empire. Because for a few reasons. Number one, it's not replaced by any other beast. No other beast comes after this 4th beast, so it's not like there's another empire that takes it over. And we also see that this 4th beast does come to an end, and we'll see in a second how that is. And we're going to read some of the scripture now. We're going to read verses 9 to 14, because this is where this dream and this vision gets even more incredible and even more beautiful, actually. So if you're following this, Daniel 7, verse 9. I've got it up there in the Persian as well, so there you go. It says this: "As I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames. Its wheels were burning fire. A stream of fire issued and came out before him. 1,000,000 served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. And the court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. I looked then, because of the sound of the great words that the horn was speaking. And as I looked, the beast was killed, and its body destroyed and given over to be burnt with fire. As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but their lives were prolonged for a season and a time." And then this: "I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, there came one like a son of man. And he came to the Ancient of Days, and he was presented before him, and to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away. And his kingdom is one that shall not be destroyed." Wow. This is quite a picture, isn't it? Daniel's attention moves from what's going on this earth picture of these beasts coming out of the water, and it moves to a throne room in the heavens, and he sees this godly figure, the Ancient of Days, sitting on this fiery throne, a startling appearance, all in white with a flaming chairs, and the chairs got wheels, and there's a river of fire and this surrounding court of people. It's this incredible, captivating image of God the Father. And you can look in Revelation, there's a very similar image, which is, you can map against this, which is very, very similar as well. There's a consistency in this apocalyptic literature. And then it says these books are opened as if they're ready for this Ancient of Days to make a judgment. And we learn this isn't just a throne room, but a courtroom. And then we see that this 4th beast is defeated. Daniel watches as this horn is still going at it with its blasphemy and its boasting, and suddenly the beast is killed and thrown into the fire. But the end of this beast doesn't come from another beast. It's not another beast that's come on and beat this one up. Something else has done it. And we learn as this goes on that it is this judgment of the Ancient of Days. It is God himself that overthrows this 4th beast. And then we have a slight change. Actually, we go slightly back in time, and I'll tell you why in a minute, but we see the Son of Man Daniel looks again in this vision, and he sees this, what he says, a figure, one like a son of man, approaching the Ancient of Days. And this is, guys, a coronation. This is the Son of Man figure going to the throne of the Father and receiving authority and glory and sovereign power. And this guy is given a kingdom that is not like any that the four other beasts had. This is an everlasting kingdom, one that will not end. It's an incredibly rich and varied and a little bit confusing, but really fascinating dream that Daniel has. And actually, this dream leaves Daniel full of questions and actually some fear as well. There's lots of questions for Daniel here, but actually what we're supposed to get from all of this is that the Ancient of Days and the Son of Man are the ones who are ultimately going to rule all other kingdoms into eternity. And the people of God, the saints of the Most High, will inherit that kingdom rule and will reign and rule with these guys. And that one day the suffering of the people of God will cease, and we will share in the victory of this Son of Man for eternity. It's really important that we try and work out and understand a little bit more about this fourth beast, okay? Because who is this fourth beast, or what is this fourth beast? There's been lots of debate over the centuries about what this fourth beast could be. And some people have just said, well, it's obviously just the next empire that came after Greece. So it must be the Roman Empire, okay? That's what a lot of people say. The fourth beast is just the Roman Empire, and then that's dealt with. But actually, I think that stops short of a full explanation. Because what we're told about this fourth beast is that, number one, it can't just be an earthly kingdom, because number one, it is not like any other kingdom in this story. It says it's not like any of the other beasts. It's different. And Rome, to be honest, while it was a very powerful kingdom, it wasn't really much different from any empire that ever gone before. Okay, it was just another empire in that sense. You can't say that Rome was any markedly different from ancient Greece or Medo-Persia or Babylon. It's not that different, really. We also know, just let me find where I was up to again there, sorry. We also know that this beast seems to reign all the way up to the point that God overthrows it, and that the people of God will then reign and rule the earth. Now, we are the people of God, right? Are we ruling the earth right now? Are we in control? Are we in power? Is God overthrown all of the earthly powers? Are we winning in that sense? I don't think we are we? Okay? So there must be a sense to which this fourth beast, this event of the fourth beast being overthrown, hasn't yet happened in human history. Okay? Which means, again, it can't be the Roman Empire, because the Roman Empire is long gone. Okay? So it can't be that either. So I think our best description of it is that this must be not just an earthly kingdom, but a spiritual kingdom. So where it says this is different from any of the empires, any of the kingdoms that came before, it's because it's not just an earthly kingdom. We need to understand it in a more spiritual sense, okay? And actually, I think the best explanation we have is that this fourth beast represents what Jesus and the New Testament writers describe as the ruler of this world. So Jesus in John 14 talks about Satan as the ruler of this world. And in 2 Corinthians 4, verse 4, Paul describes Satan as the god of this world. And in Ephesians 2, verse 2, Paul describes Satan as the prince of the power of the air. Now, that sounds a bit uncomfortable, doesn't it? That Satan has this power, he has this rule, he's giving kingship over the earth. But actually, the Bible's very consistent about this. That actually some sort of spiritual power shift happened when Jesus ascended to heaven, which will come in a moment. He was crowned King of heaven, King of all. And yet, we now exist in a kind of dual kingship. We know that Jesus is on his throne. Do you know that? Jesus is on his throne right now in the heavens. He is on his throne. And yet in the earth, Satan has some power still. Satan is still battling the people of God. Satan still has some dominion over the earth. And guys, when you look at the earth, it's pretty obvious, right? Does the earth feel peaceful? Does the earth feel like it's going pretty well? Does it look like an earth that's just full of holiness and peace and goodness? It doesn't, does it? We can see as we just look around the earth that something's not right, that there must be someone else who is having some dominion and some power. And Satan's rule is limited. He's on a leash, as it were, and he's ultimately going to be defeated by God. But nevertheless, right now, he is at war. He is fighting hard to prevent people like you and me from knowing God and entering the kingdom of God. So you've got this kind of dual kingship going on. Okay, there's a lot going on here, okay? I appreciate that. Stick with me because we're just going to pull some things out of it. Daniel, at the end of this dream, was troubled, okay? At the end of this dream, he wasn't like, oh, that was a nice dream. I'll get up and have my cornflakes now. That was a nice night. No, he woke up troubled and scared, and particularly scared because in this dream, this fourth beast, this kingdom of Satan, attacks the people of God. And he makes the people of God have an awful time. Actually, there's suffering. And he's looking at this and thinking, oh my word, God's people are going to suffer and suffer and suffer. That's why he's so troubled. And yet, I think there's a lot of good news in this story for us. And the first thing I want to just bring out for us is that we need to remember that we belong to a bigger story, okay? Now, guys, there's a lot going on in the world right now. There are wars raging around us, both physical wars and cultural wars going on. In this year, in 2024, I don't know if you know, there are more elections taking place than in any other year in history. 64 different nations are having elections this year. There are huge seismic shifts of power potentially taking place, and that is causing all sorts of debate and division and chaos. We've got ongoing financial and energy crises in global economies. There's all sorts of awful stuff happening. We've got climate going haywire, everything happening. And that's just the big picture. What about our own lives? You only have to spend a week reading the entries on the Freedom Church prayer WhatsApp to see what we're dealing with. The trials that the people of God are facing. Illnesses, deaths, job problems, relationship struggles, money problems, immigration system delays. Life is full of drama. And these situations loom large for us often. It is so easy to just become absolutely consumed by our circumstances and to lose focus. And it can start to dictate our mood and our actions and our mental health. And it can even lead us to taking unwise, even sinful decisions as we look at the size of this problem in front of us. How do I get out of this? Sometimes we even might take the wrong choice. And it's in these weak moments, it's in these difficult moments that the devil, the prince of the power of the air, the fourth beast, loves to play havoc. He loves to come and he loves to say, hey, I can offer you a way out of this. Or I can help with this situation. I can put something in front of you that's going to look better. I can tempt you. Why not indulge in this? Why not go for that? This will sort you out. And he comes to us with all these shiny things that look great to try and raise us from the problem that we're in. He comes to us with offers of sex and money and alcohol and approval and status and power and possession. He says, these are the better things. These are the things that are going to help you in this situation. And often, sometimes, we go for them. And yet I think we've got so much to learn from Daniel. Daniel's life was dramatic as well. Daniel lived through the agony of seeing his home city destroyed and his friends and himself and his family and all of his people carried off into captivity into Babylon. He endured the highs and the lows of the roller coaster ride of serving volatile kings and rulers and who put him in life-threatening situations and gave him horrendous choices to make. And it often seemed like Daniel and his friends, his life lay in the hands of tyrants and ungodly powers. And at any moment, Daniel could have said, this is too much. I'm just going to cave. I'm just going to bow down to you. I'm just going to give in. I can't take anymore. But he knew that his God is bigger. And he knew that God's story was bigger. And in the midst of this captivity, God gives Daniel this dream to show him this wider picture. It's like he pulls him away from the tiny bit of the canvas that he's focusing on, and he shows him this masterpiece that he's putting together. Guys, I think often, and it's interesting what Jay said earlier as well about significant but small. I think often we look at our lives as if they're our story, and occasionally when we feel we need it, we invite God in just to come and, can you just help with this little bit of my story, God? I'm struggling here. Can you just come in for 5 minutes, God, and just help me with this thing, and then I'll carry on my way. And what Daniel's trying to show to God, I said, no. So what God's trying to show to Daniel is, no. This is my story. And I'm inviting you to live in my story. It's not about your story. I'm doing something far bigger, far greater. My story doesn't just last the 80, 90, 70, however many years your life might be on earth. My story is an eternal one. And you're a significant part of it. You belong to that story. And shift your gaze. Look at the bigger picture and see what I'm doing. And this is where I said before, that understanding the order of the events in Daniel is really helpful. Remember I said about the lion's den? This dream is 15 years before that. So Daniel has this crisis of the lion's den and this threat that you must bow down to only King Darius and no one else. And if you bow down to your own God, you're going to end up in the lion's den. Now, if Daniel hadn't had this dream, he may well have been very tempted to go for that because it's a life or death choice. And yet Daniel knows, King Darius, he ain't going to last. He's part of a kingdom that's going to be replaced in a few years by another kingdom. I could bow down to him and it might give me 5 minutes of peace, but I'll have traded away my inheritance. I know who's going to win. My God. I might not see that victory this week, but I know in eternity, if I stick with him, I'm going to rule. I'm going to reign. I'm going to inherit the very kingdom that will never perish, that will never fade. You see how that suddenly makes that choice really much easier? That choice to say, no, I'm not going to bow down to you, Darius, because I know you're not the winner. Your power is temporary and short. We would do well to remember this in our own situations. When temptation comes, when idols are set before us to chase and worship, when we're given the stark choice between God's way and man's way or the devil's way, we would do well to see the bigger picture and to remember who's going to win and what we stand to inherit by choosing God's side. I think that's a really important thing to take out of this. I also just want to be really clear that the second thing is that we need to know that there is suffering involved in following God. Daniel's dream is difficult to stomach because it basically assures us as the people of God that we will suffer. That the devil is out to get us. The Bible talks about the devil prowling like a lion, waiting to pounce and devour us. It's real. We're at risk. We are at risk from the devil. He wants to have his way with us. And we see that throughout the New Testament. Actually, one of the promises of God that we don't like to talk about is in this life you will have trouble. That's a promise of God. You will have trouble. Shouldn't be a surprise to us. We live in a fallen world, temporarily affected by the rule of an evil kingdom, Satan's kingdom. And until God overthrows that fourth beast in his good timing, in his perfect sovereign timing, we're going to struggle. We're going to endure a life that is full of frustration, a life that is tinged by sin and death. That's what we're promised. We're living in a broken, messed up world dominated by our sin and the consequences of it. And if we only focus on that, and if we look no higher and see no further, guys, life very quickly feels pretty awful, pretty hopeless, pretty unenjoyable. And therefore, we must look beyond. And the way we can look beyond is to know, as I said before, we know where Jesus is. We know where he is. He's enthroned. He is on the throne of heaven, and he's just waiting for God's sovereign moment when he will return and he will rule. This vision that Daniel has of the Son of Man ascending to the Ancient of Days, for Daniel, that was a confusing future picture. He was like, what on earth does that mean? I don't get it. What's he talking about? What are you talking about, God? But for us, that is an already realized event. I hope you know that. I hope you know that. Jesus told his disciples just moments before he died that was going to happen. He says there in Mark, you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven. And then in Acts 2, just a few weeks later, Peter, speaking and preaching the gospel, says, God has raised this Jesus to life. We are all witnesses of it. And he is exalted to the right hand of God. And he has received, not he's going to, he has received from the Father the promised Holy Spirit. And he's poured out what you're now seeing here. And then, if that wasn't enough, Acts 7, Stephen preaching the gospel bravely to his death. He is stoned to death for standing up and preaching the gospel. He stands there, and as he's about to be stoned, he sees upwards. And he says, I see heaven open and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of God. This vision Daniel sees has already happened, this part of it. Jesus refers to himself as the Son of Man around 80 times in the Gospels. It is his favorite title that he uses for himself. He wants us to be in no doubt. Guys, this Son of Man guy you see in Daniel, it's me. I am going to be on the throne. I am on the throne. And it's important because we need to know that for all that we are suffering, for all that we will struggle, we are already on the winning team. We are. Jesus has already won. Satan will have his small victories. He will have his attacks. He will keep coming at us, but he is a beaten enemy. He is defeated. He has got no other outcome facing him other than defeat. And for us who are suffering now, the only outcome that can possibly happen for us is victory, because God has assured it. He has promised it. He has decreed it. He has already set it in motion. And again, we shouldn't be surprised. It's littered throughout Scripture that we will suffer, but we will inherit the kingdom. We win. You can look a bit more cheerful about that if you want. We win, guys. Jesus says it in the Sermon on the Mount in the Beatitudes. You ever remember this? Blessed are the poor in spirit. How on earth are the poor in spirit blessed? Well, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. You're going to get the kingdom of heaven. You're going to receive the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the meek. The meek? What's good about the meek? How are the meek blessed? For they shall inherit the earth. They shall inherit the earth. It's right there. Jesus is saying, guys, there's going to be some suffering. There's going to be some pain. It's going to feel like you're losing easily. But ultimately, I promise you, we win. And how do you win? Well, we don't win by tooling up and fighting the devil on our own with our own strength and going to war with him on our own. We win because Jesus wins. We win because the most destructive and powerful weapon that the devil has, death, has already been defeated. Jesus comprehensively defeated it on the cross. The punishment for our sin, the punishment for our rebellion, the punishment for what we've done to this world, for our choices to follow the kingdom of Satan rather than the kingdom of God, has already been taken by Jesus. He died that we might live, and he died that we would get to become children of God. If you don't know that today, I can't tell you how important that is. You need to know it. You need to know it. Actually, part of our job as Christians, the other day I was out walking with my brother-in-law, and I committed the cardinal error of we were talking about a TV series that we were both watching, and I just assumed he was up to the same point as me, and I gave away just a massive part of the plot. Like not just a little bit, like I literally told him that the main character was going to die, okay? It was pretty awful. He should have known it was the Crown. I don't know how he didn't. I'm joking. It wasn't that. But like spoilers are generally thought of as pretty bad, aren't they? We don't like spoilers. We don't want things to be spoiled. But actually, our job is to give the spoiler. Our job is to tell this world, guys, do you know who wins? Do you know who wins? And it's not the guy you're following. It's not the lifestyle that you're living. It's not the prince of this earth. God wins. Jesus is the king. And if you follow him, you win too. But don't make the mistake of joining the wrong team or staying where you are. I just want to finish with a final piece of apocalyptic literature from Revelation, just to emphasize how good this victory is, how important it is. Because we can think of heaven, can't we, as this kind of twee sort of, I don't know, image that people have of fluffy clouds and little angels playing harps, and we're just going to sit on these clouds and worship God, and it's going to be all nice and weird. But that's not what heaven is, guys. It's something way better. And this is the vision that John has in the end of Revelation. It says this: "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, 'Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people. And God himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more.'" Death shall be no more. "Neither will there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away." And he who is seated on the throne said, "Behold, I am making all things new." That's where we're headed, guys. The people of God, that is the promise we have over us. It's not a fluffy cloud and a harp. It's living in a new creation, in the full, unrestricted presence of God. That is good news. That is victory. That is where we're going. And we have to keep it in mind, because if we don't, we will struggle horrendously on this earth. We need to claim that victory now. We need to live in the truth of it to help us in the darkness that we're in. And we need to tell the world all about it so that they can come and join us too. That's what we can take from this chapter. I know it's a bit crazy. I know it's a bit weird, but that is where we need to be with it at the end. And I think we're just going to finish by worshiping, by actually celebrating this amazing God and the amazing victory he's won. Deb, do you want to come up? And just glorifying him. Just glorifying, because this God has done all this for us. And he's shown us the truth. And he's shown us what is going to be ours. And he's promised it to us. And our future is with him. Is that good news? Yeah. Good. Let's stand, guys. I'm going to pray, and then we're going to sing.